Hey, welcome back to another episode of Keep Standing with Dr. Timothy W. Sloan. So grateful again to have you sharing with us here on this podcast. Listen, do me a big favor. Again, make sure as always you like, share, you subscribe, tell others about this podcast. If it's been a big blessing to you, then let's make sure it's a benefit to others. Well, we are back once again with one of my absolute favorites, the Reverend Dr. Gina Stewart. She is the pastor of the Christ Missionary Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, and also the past president of Lot Carey Baptist Foreign Mission Society. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Listen, the first one got really exciting. So we want to keep it rolling here. And I want to jump into one of these social concern conversations. You again, we talk about capital. You got it. And I mean, serving on the national board for the NAACP,
Right.
as well as president of Lot Carey. You've been in these circles, and especially in a season like this, where we got some major issues that we're really dealing with. When you see those conversations or you hear them, how do you see our role today as faith leaders evolving in today's social justice movements?
I've always had some commitment to social justice. It is a part of my inherited faith tradition because my predecessor was socially active. He was active in social justice. So to some extent, it's always been in my DNA. But it was not always as pronounced as it is now. It took going to seminary and also attending the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Pastors Conference, which really radicalized me and challenged my stewardship, not only as a pastor, but also in terms of my proclamation. It was Proctor that awakened the need for me to claim my prophetic voice in the pulpit, and to be intentional about that, and to ensure that whenever I preach, that I am not just dealing with piety, but this intersection of piety and justice, because I believe that justice is not political, it's biblical. And so because of that, I believe that for pastors and preachers, that we are called to be more than just caretakers, that we have an opportunity to be catalysts because we have influence. We have a pulpit that we have stewardship over every week. And one of the best ways that we can steward that moment or that pulpit is to use our influence for the greater good. And so I think it's important that we, not just be on the sidelines, but we find a way to get involved. Dr. Martha Simmons posted a graphic the other day, and I don't have it. I wish I could give you a copy of it. But basically, it was talking about do something. That was really the gist of it. And you may not march, but you can write a letter. You may not be able to write a letter, but you can give to an organization that has capacity, that's helping us to fight these battles that we're fighting, because we need all hands on deck at this point, which is one of the reasons why I'm involved with NAACP. It's one of the ways that I can work through some of my desire and my passion for social justice, because I know that NAACP has a long history of fighting against injustice and fighting for the human dignity and civil rights of all human beings. And I get a chance to put that in practice. But I also have the opportunity to invite my congregation to not only participate in pastoral ministry from the standpoint of leading and guiding and sustaining and caring for the flock and caring for souls, but also protest and proclamation. That it's a way to energize my congregation and to educate them as well, because we live in a day of sound bites, conspiracy theories, and social media clips that are on YouTube that are often not vetted. And so it's important for us, I think, to lend a clear, not only be a trusted voice, but a clear voice, so that we can help people navigate this season that we're in. Because there's so much disinformation and so much misinformation that is floating around. And it's really critical for, I think, pastors to lift our voices. You don't have to preach about justice every Sunday, of course, because there are other concerns. But I think to mute our voices and act as if God is not interested in these concerns, as if God has nothing to say about these concerns, is malpractice.
What a beautiful entree into what I was thinking. Wonderful, because I'm sitting there thinking, you talk about the necessity of us, lending our prophetic voice to the pulpit and to the community at this critical period.
Yeah.
But is there concern that maybe there's some lethargy in handling that responsibility from many colleagues today in faith communities? Because there's a cost to it.
Yeah,
we
there's
talked
a cost.
about that. But it's so critical.
Right.
And you talk about, this is almost prophetic malpractice if you don't say something in this season, but then want to assume the platform on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Do you worry some that there's some lethargy?
Yeah, I think that, as I listen to people who have worked in civil rights, some of the veterans, it's not unusual. There's nothing glamorous about social justice. Social justice is not, as they would say, sexy. When I think about Samuel Billy Kyles, who pastored up the street from my church for years, he's gone home to be with the Lord now, but he was one of Martin Luther King's closest friends, and Dr. Lassemba Gray, who I mentioned earlier. When I hear their stories and they talk about what they did back in those days and how they would try to rally pastors and people to protest, and that in every instance, there would only be a handful of folk that would show up. This is pretty typical because social justice work is draining. It's exhausting because you never seem to win a battle. As soon as you win a battle, there's another battle to fight. If you think about what's going on now, every day, there is some new battle to fight. And that can be exhausting. That can be draining. I heard Stacey Abrams say that the kind of environment that we're in right now can motivate a person to embrace what she called internal exile, to bury your head until the storm passes, to pull the cover over your heads, to retreat, to isolate, and just hope that things will pass over. But what she says is that is not what we need to be doing in this hour, that we are the solution. We are the ones that we have been looking for. And we have to do whatever we can within our capacity, as with whatever lies within us, to make that happen. We all sit at different seats of power, and we have different networks. And I think we have to leverage those moments and those spaces as best we can. Because as Dr. Raphael Warnock said once, 60 years from now, our children are going to ask us, what did we do with this moment? And we want to be able to say, well, at least I tried.
Right.
At least I tried. At least I had somebody to sign a petition or write a letter or march or preach a sermon.
Or you don't want to be found having to, when it's asked, what did you say, to have to be mute.
Right. Exactly.
Or to dance around it because you didn't say something.
Right.
So let's talk about, leaders in places today who are seeing this, and we know we got to do something. You talked about do something. There's some work that you can do. But then maybe, let's be honest, maybe some are looking, what's the win for me? So what is the win?
Well, and I think the win is knowing that you have done what God required of you. I think that's part of the challenge with social justice, because the benefit is not an immediate personal benefit.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit is, what does it do to help us collectively? Where is the communal value? To ask what is the win for me may not be the right question.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're only thinking about what the win is for you as a person, you really don't have an incentive. Folk like us, let's face it, we will probably survive 47 by the grace of God, because we have decent jobs.
Yeah.
God has blessed us. I'm not really fighting. I'm fighting for me, but I'm also thinking about the folk that cannot fight for themselves. That is the win. The win is not my personal victory. The win is the collective victory and the communal victory, so that we don't wake up and find that progress has been rolled back 200 years.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it eventually trickles down. Eventually it trickles down. It may not hit us yet. But what is that point say? And then they came for me.
That's exactly what I'm sitting here thinking.
And then they came. I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist, and I didn't say anything. But then they came for me, and there was no one to speak up for me. King said, we are inescapably networked. I know you know this. You're more house man. In a garment of mutuality. What affects me affects you. And we say the same thing in the body of Christ. Yeah. We are many members, one body, but not all members have the same office. So at the end of the day, it may not necessarily feel as if it affects us, but eventually it will.
So it makes me think then that there is, we missed the right motivation today in let's say in our faith communities, in leadership roles. Is there a concern like, man, the motivation is off? That, if you got to think that long and hard about how is this going to be taken, and should I say something, and do I keep quiet, then man, maybe you need to check your motivation for what you're called to do.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Marvin McMichael would say, part of the problem is that we've lost our prophetic edge. That praise and worship and prosperity preaching has taken the place of prophetic preaching. Because if, in the words of Frank Thomas, if everything is about getting my breakthrough and my season coming, I'm not thinking about somebody else's season. And so I think pastors also have to be willing to risk that, because we are very self-centered as individuals. We're self-centered as human beings. We tend to think about ourselves first. And much of our preaching, let's face it, often it revolves around personal benefit, personal advancement, personal, And so when you're talking collective, when you're talking communal, when you're talking prophetically, when you're preaching prophetically, it is more of a communal focus as opposed to a personal focus. And prophetic preaching reshapes that lens and that vision, so that we are not just concerned about what happens to us, but we're concerned about what happens to the neighbor that lives, the person that sits on the pew beside us.
I hope that we can lean in this season to the importance of continuing to amplify that prophetic voice in our congregation.
And I would add, not just prophetic voice, but prophetic practice as well. So it's not just what we say,
it's what you do.
It's also what we do and what we embody.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this then. We're talking about what we do when we embody. Again, we go back to this. You're a person of first, and a real barrier breaker. So when let's look at internal. How do you balance when we talk about the church? We're talking about the breakthrough there, and kind of the disrupting sort of the traditionalism and the practice there. How do you balance respecting tradition with the need for progressive change? And you come into, and I'm respecting that there's a sense of tradition, but I know my responsibility is to move in this direction towards that. How do you balance that?
I think one of the things that you have to do is in a congregation, you have to exegete your congregation. You have to know where the landmines are. You got to know the history. One of the things that helped me is that I was a daughter of the church. So I knew where the landmines were. I knew what were the sacred cows, if you will. And I knew also where there were certain things that if they were not addressed, they could potentially undermine congregational advancement and congregational vision and mission. And that's one of the litmus tests that I've used. If it undermines congregational advancement, if it undermines mission and vision, then it deserves to be revisited. And so I don't necessarily think that tradition in and of itself is necessarily bad, because when we talk about tradition, we're really talking about what we've inherited. You know, those practices, those faith traditions and practices that we have inherited. But being traditional is what can get us in trouble. For example, refusing to relax your dress code.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, realistically speaking, yes, there are people that say, well, you should wear your Sunday best. But if you have people that get off at 7 and they want to come to church, you're going to make them go home and change clothes and put on a dress to come to church when they could just really come straight to worship. So it's those kinds of things that I think, and I'm using that as an example, those kinds of things that we have to revisit, because seasons change.
Sure.
The Bible says that the men of Issachar understood the times and they knew what Israel ought to do. We can't just exegete the text. We also have to exegete the times as well, so that we can make the kinds of decisions that will lead to not only the flourishing of our communities, but the flourishing of the people that are in our pews, because that's really why they come. We tell them that we offer the best product in the world, Jesus, and that Jesus can change their lives. But so often our traditions, well, Jesus put it this way: we make the word of God of no effect by our traditions. And so our traditions sometimes get in the way of us being as effective and as impactful as we could be. And so I think it's very important to revisit. It's important to critique practices, to ask questions. Why do we do this? So much of what we do, we don't even know why we do it. We just do it. Well, that's how we always done it. You know, I know you heard that the 7 last words of the church. We've never done it like that before.
Right.
You know, why haven't we? So those are and I think you have to know your demographic, because what works at the Luke may not necessarily work at Christ Missionary. What works in Memphis may not necessarily work in Houston. And best practices, we look for best practices, but I think it also means you also have to gain the trust of the congregation to trust you and build that capital, so that they give you the latitude to make some of those changes that are necessary. And you got to teach the change too. I remember when every time I wanted to make a change in our congregation, I would always teach it first. I would provide the historical precedent, you know, to help people enter in to see this is why we do this. But this is also why we don't necessarily have to do this. You know, why do we start at 11 o'clock? Historically, we know why folks start at 11, they say. So those are the kinds of things that I think we have to do. We have to teach people so that they are able to release some of those traditions, because they become sacred.
You talk about, exegeting. In my book, Stand, Learning to Lead Through Conflict, I talk about the fact that was one of the mistakes I made, was not fully exegeting the congregation when I came in, so that when we started making change and it impacts some of the traditions, then the response came the kind of, resistance. And here's the problem. I thought it was about me. So now I'm baited into a fight, and it ain't even about me.
Right.
It's about something that happened years ago.
That's right.
So that ultimately, when everything flared, I finally realized the trauma happened 30, 40 years.
Right. That's exactly right.
That was still the residue had been passed down generationally that I did not look for.
Right. Right. And see, there's value attached to certain things. Like I remember, this is a classic example. I remember we were doing some remodeling in our church, and we were changing something out in the baptistry. So there was a picture that was in the baptistry. We took the picture down. We didn't destroy it. We took the picture down because we wanted to update the picture. Well, what I didn't know, even though I was a member of the church, is that one of the members' son had painted that picture.
Mm.
And so when that picture came down, there was a value attached to that picture. Thankfully, we had rolled the picture up, and the family did not get angry about it. They didn't start a fight. You know, they were a little disappointed that the picture had come down, that mural had come down, but there wasn't a lot of resistance. But that's a classic example of knowing the history and knowing what values are attached to certain things when you're trying to make change.
Mm-hmm.
It helped me because I was a daughter of the church. But imagine if you're walking into a ministry and you have no history.
Yeah.
Anything can really lead to a major revolution.
Yeah. And again, let me say, you want to have strategies to try and deal with that stuff, navigate that. But I also think that there's value in facing the conflict, in being immersed in situations going to require you to really stand, if you will. So, you and Cynthia Hale and Elaine Flake, you all are taking the brunt for a lot of women in ministry who are coming now. You all have faced that conflict, but now that there's another generation coming along, what's the advice? We want to go back to this question. What's the advice that you're offering to young women aspiring to leadership roles in faith-based communities? I got two beautiful daughters. One is at Spelman and one, is in junior in high school, and they're both, I think, leaders. But a part of me is like, I know the fight that you're going to have to face, and wanting to make sure I expose you to every tool to have in your arsenal as you begin to make these strides in these roles. So what does Gina Stewart say?
You mentioned Elaine Flake and Cynthia Hale, and I would also add Joanne Browning, Renita Weems, Claudette Copeland. All of those women were women that I met at a very critical juncture in my ministry. I was actually invited to do a women's conference for Dr. Weems because one of her speakers couldn't make the meeting, and I met all of them. And I discovered the value of being in women-friendly spaces because what they did with those women's conferences, they created an oasis in the desert, basically. And it was not just about what women received who came to the conference, which of course was just amazing. You received great teaching, great music, great fellowship, but it also was an arena for us to build our voices, strengthen our voices, practice preaching, if you will. They gave us those kinds of settings that women often don't get. But you go to Allen Women's Retreat, for example, and Dr. Elaine gives you a workshop or two workshops, and then gives you a special interest workshop. Each time you are doing that kind of work, you're not only strengthening your voice, finding your voice, but you're also building a body of work. Those kinds of spaces are so important and so critical. And I am forever and eternally grateful that God would orchestrate my life in such a way that I would even meet people like that, because they were instrumental in helping me to build my confidence. And not only that, I talked about the guys that have opened doors. There were doors open too because of their stages. I preached for Dr. Renita and then Reverend Elaine and Reverend Dr. Cynthia. Dr. Cynthia and Dr. Elaine invited me to preach. I preached for Dr. Elaine and somebody, so they have been, only eternity will reveal the true record of their stewardship. There's almost like an apostolic call that was on their lives to steward those moments. And now, as Claudette would call them, their eras, because you're talking about Elaine Flake, who 40 years hosted a women's conference that brought women from all over the country, 15, 16, 17, 2,000 women. Dr. Joanne Browning, who is going into her 41st year this year. I think this is her 41st year of a women's season. It's her 40th year of a women. Can you imagine every year, 2,000 women coming from everywhere? Yeah. Dr. Cynthia Hale. And then you add to that the vision that God gave Dr. Hale to host a women in ministry conference, because what she said was everywhere she went, somebody wanted a mentor. Because women don't have mentors. Actually, I think mentoring is the missing link for men and women, quite frankly. I don't think men are being mentored like women are either. I don't think men are being mentored either, men, male or female. I think that's the missing link. But I think for women, it's often more pronounced because there are not as many of us. So whenever we go places, there's usually at least one person that says, do you mentor? Will you mentor me? That's how women in ministry was birthed. And so for 20 years, this is the 20th year anniversary of that vision. And women come from all over the country, and it's specifically for women in ministry. So it's leadership, it's coaching, it's networking, it's relationship building, it's spiritual, and it's scholarly. So they get it. It's the entire package. Yeah. It's creating those kinds of spaces where women come and we say, we really not crazy. God really did. God really did. Because you can hear so much that you begin to say, well, then maybe I miss God. Maybe God was not talking to me. And then you go in these spaces and you see all these women that have this same call on their lives, and they are flowing, and God is using them, and they're leading churches, and not all of them are leading churches. Some of them are working on staff. Some of them are leading parachurchmen. You see all of that. So you have these relationships that are being built. And so iron is sharpening iron. In fact, that's the theme. That's the theme verse, that iron sharpens iron. And the daughters of Zelophehad said, give us our stuff, basically. That's what happens in those kinds of spaces. And I think that doesn't always happen in our church spaces. But those kinds of spaces, those women's conferences, those women in ministry conferences have created those kinds of women-friendly spaces that have helped many of us to not only develop our voices, but also find our voice and build our confidence.
Well, certainly we all owe that gratitude to you all and what you've done. So now, and I wanted this last question is that you've opened these spaces, you've done the mentoring, we've got this next generation of women leaders. You evoked the name of Stacey Abrams, one of my Spellhouse classmates, and in different spaces of leadership. What's now the responsibility that you have, Gina Stewart, saying, all right, now here's what you need to do and what we expect of you as we pass this on?
I think one of the things that happens is the same thing we do in our churches. As leaders, we see things in people that they don't see in themselves. And we push them out of the nest. We challenge them to take on responsibilities that they don't even think they can take on themselves. We just recently had a leadership conference, and we were having some conversation, and some of the leaders were talking about the way that they ended up in leadership because they didn't want to say no to the pastor, but they discovered that that the pastor, they were talking about myself, believed in them and saw something in them that they didn't see in themselves. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to help people discover the giant that's within them. When I was coming along in ministry, there was a Felicia Sarden. She was a high school guidance counselor or principal, teacher, educator. She was the one who would give me that gentle nudge, and she would say, now that you've done this, now it's time for you to do this. She would feed me these little assignments, and then now that you've done this, you need to do this. Moselle Starks, who was the superintendent of a Sunday school who tapped me to be the the Sunday school secretary to count the money. I mean, all of those kinds of opportunities and tasks that they gave us were building us as leaders. Felicia Sarden went back to Reverend Curry, said, "What do you think about letting Gina do the announcements?" She's old enough to do it now. I'm not thinking about this, but there are other people who are speaking your name into spaces, as Frank Thomas would say, speaking your name in rooms that you don't even know about. That is a part of our legacy, I think. And that is a part of what we have to give our daughters that are coming behind us. That gentle nudge, that vote of confidence. Say, you can do this. You got this. Even on social media, a lot of times I see a lot of young women, I don't even know them personally. But if they're saying that they're trying something, I'm like, you got this, because affirmation matters. It matters. It's oxygen to the soul.
I'm starting to get so excited. I get so excited. You're inspiring me. Yeah, it is oxygen to the soul.
Oxygen to the soul. That one sentence, that one line from somebody that believes in you.
I mean, here's evidence. You remembering somebody who said this in Sunday school, that you're able to still call their name.
Can call their name. And listen, when I call their names, I almost cry.
Yeah.
When I was about to preach my first sermon, Laura Jones called my pastor. She said, Gina needs a robe. Wow. She said, tell her to go down to BH&S Taylor's. I can still remember white crushed velvet, white robe with crushed velvet crosses. Those were the people.
I think I've seen that picture too.
Who were the wind. I need to send you that.
I've seen it.
They were the wind beneath my wings. And they never lived. This is the other thing. Many of them never lived to see this moment. They never lived to see this moment. But they're somewhere cheering in the stands.
Wow. That is so rich. I mean, if you're not inspired by that,
and I want to be the person that when somebody who comes after me is talking to a you, they'll say that something like that about me. Nobody would ever know Felicia Sarden. Nobody would ever know Laura D. Jones other than the people that knew her in our church. But the only reason why there is a me and that I've been able to do what I do is because there was a Laura Jones and a Felicia Sarden. And of course, parents and all of that. But these were women who were these were women who were leaders that pushed and gave that gentle nudge and that word of encouragement.
Listen, I've never got a chance to do this before, but I want to tell you thank you. Your voice, vision, and presence is inspiring more than just women across this country.
Praise the Lord.
Young pulpiteers like myself have been inspired from afar by the work that you do, the confidence that you show, and the fact that you're willing to do it afraid. Just who you are, Dr. Gina Stewart, is such a gift to this global world. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Well,
thank you so much.
Listen, tell us again how we can find you.
Okay, so again, I pastor Christ Missionary Baptist Church in Memphis, but we are also live on Sunday mornings, and you can access our service at 11 a.m. Central Daylight Time at www.christmbc.org or live.christmbc.org or on Facebook, facebook.com//ChristMBC, or you can also access my social media credentials or pages through Facebook. Gina M. Stewart is my personal page. Dr. Gina M. Stewart is my public page. And I'm also on IG at Dr. Gina M. Stewart.
One of God's absolute best.
God bless you.
Dr. Gina Stewart.
You might be a little biased, but
I am.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but I'm grateful. I promise you, the world knows.
Praise God.
So grateful again to each of you. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Again, don't forget to share, tell everybody you know about this conversation. I know this conversation is going to help a lot of people. So make sure you tell them.
May it be so.
Appreciate you. Until next time, keep standing.